The studio lights blaze across the set, casting a polished glow over the chairs as cameras quietly reposition, and the host leans forward with that signature mix of curiosity and restraint, the kind meant to coax out truth without pushing too hard. And right there sits Tamar, shifting slightly, offering a nervous laugh that doesn't quite match the seriousness in his eyes as he begins repeating the same line he's clung to since the night everything exploded. It was just a birthday party. The host raises an eyebrow, giving him room to elaborate. But instead of expanding, Tamer circles back, insisting again that nothing unusual happened, that it was all supposed to be a simple celebration that got blown out of proportion. Yet the tension in his voice betrays a subtle strain, a man aware that millions are waiting to catch the smallest crack in his story. The studio's hum grows heavier as he tries to maintain that calm facade, recounting how he walked into the venue, greeted friends, laughed, danced, acted like everything was normal, as if the night didn't turn into one of the most dissected and sensationalized events online. The host finally asks the question everyone has been waiting for, leaning closer. So you're telling us once again that nothing happened beyond a birthday party? No drama, no argument, no misunderstanding. Tamar swallows, nods firmly, but the slight hesitation, barely a breath, barely a flicker, reveals more than he intends. And he quickly masks it with another small laugh, trying to paint the entire situation as exaggerated gossip. He describes the flashing lights, the music, the crowded room, insisting that the only thing he remembers clearly is enjoying himself and leaving before anything escalated. But the more he speaks, the more it feels like he's reciting something memorized, something practiced in front of a mirror, crafted to survive public scrutiny. The studio audience remains silent, watching him closely, sensing that the story underneath isn't lining up with the calm delivery. And even as Tamar repeats that iconic phrase, "It was just a birthday party," for the third time, the host's subtle smirk suggests what viewers are thinking too. If it truly was just a birthday party, why does Tamar look like a man holding on to a version of events that might slip from his hands at any moment? The moment Funky walks into the studio, the entire atmosphere shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of quiet tension that makes everyone instinctively sit up straighter, as if a different energy has entered the room, heavier, sharper, more certain. Unlike Tamer's fidgeting and nervous chuckles, Funky moves with a slow, deliberate confidence, his expression unreadable, his posture controlled, the kind of calm that feels more dangerous than yelling ever could. He sits down, adjusts his mic, and when the host asks for his version of the night, Funky doesn't hesitate for even a second. His voice is steady, leveled, almost too calm as he says the words that instantly carve the air in half. Tamar is a bold-faced liar. No stutter, no pause, no softening, just a direct strike. The host leans back, surprised by the bluntness, and the crew behind the cameras instinctively freeze, knowing they've just entered a completely different interview. Funky begins replaying the night in his mind as if he's watching it on a screen only he can see, recalling every expression, every shift in tone, every glance exchanged across that room. He explains that he didn't come to start drama or feed social media, but because watching Tamar twist the narrative into something safe and convenient was something he couldn't ignore anymore. His voice tightens, not with rage, but with a controlled frustration. This is a man who has held his tongue for too long. He lays out how Tamar kept repeating the birthday party storyline like a script rehearsed in a bathroom mirror, ignoring key details, omitting moments Funky witnessed firsthand, and pretending the energy of the night was innocent when it was anything but. Funky recounts the shifts in Tamer's demeanor, the uncomfortable glances, the contradictions slipping through his own interviews, and why he finally reached a breaking point. When someone lies on your name, on your presence, on what you saw with your own eyes, you don't stay quiet. His calmness startles the audience because beneath it is a clear current of anger, not wild, not uncontrollable, but precise, the kind that comes from betrayal, from watching someone publicly rewrite the truth while expecting everyone else to stay silent. And as Funky finishes describing the night with unwavering detail, the tension becomes undeniable. While Tamar looked like a man clinging to a shaky story, Funky looks like someone who came prepared to burn every false narrative to the ground. The moment Funky drops the bombshell that Mendes and his friend went upstairs together while Tamar kept pretending it was just a birthday party, the internet practically ignites in real time. Because this isn't the kind of detail people gloss over. It's the kind that reshapes an entire narrative within minutes. Funky explains it calmly, almost methodically, saying he saw them slip away toward the upstairs section while the energy on the main floor shifted. And the second those words leave his mouth, social media platforms explode with theories, reactions, and edited clips pulling together every scrap of footage from that night. What had been a faint rumor suddenly becomes the focal point of a digital wildfire as viewers slow down blurry videos, highlight suspicious movements, and circle faces in red to argue over whether Mendes really did vanish upstairs and whether Tamar knew more than he claimed. Threads multiply by the thousands, some siding with Funky's unwavering certainty, others accusing Tamar of playing innocent to dodge responsibility. And within hours, the whole situation transforms from a personal dispute into a viral cultural event. TikTok comment sections fill with "ain't no way this was just a party," while Twitter timelines spiral into detective mode, pulling timestamps, lighting angles, and witness accounts to build their own timelines. Even people who weren't following the situation before suddenly find themselves sucked in, questioning why Tamar left that part out of his interviews and why Funky's details sound more precise, more lived in, more aligned with how chaotic nights usually unfold. Influencers drop reaction videos, podcasts dedicate emergency episodes, and YouTubers break down the drama frame by frame, dissecting Funky's claim like a courtroom testimony. And through all of it, one undeniable pattern forms. The internet begins reframing the story, shifting suspicion away from Funky and aiming it directly at Mendes and Tamer, demanding answers that neither has provided. Memes flood timelines, edits contrast Tamer's nervous laughter with Funky's surgical calmness. And hashtags trend overnight as the narrative becomes bigger than the three people involved. Suddenly, the entire situation isn't just about what happened at a party, becomes a public referendum on truth, loyalty, and the stories people try to control when the cameras are rolling, but the internet is watching even closer. The night begins in the most ordinary way in the Tamer Mendes story leak, a detail that now feels heavy with meaning as every moment from that evening is dissected, replayed, and questioned by millions online. It starts with nothing more than buzzing phones, a few casual messages, and those familiar last-minute weekend plans that don't seem important until they become the center of a scandal. Tamar describes how he was lounging at home, scrolling through social media, when a simple "text you out tonight" set everything into motion. His friend was already downtown, hungry and in the mood to chill, and Tamer, thinking nothing of it, decided to join. Meanwhile, Mendes and the others were also moving loosely, shifting ideas, checking availability, and bouncing between potential hangout spots. There was no grand plan, no drama in the air, just the kind of flexible, edgy vibe that makes nights unpredictable. Eventually, the group settled on a well-known steakhouse, warm lighting, upbeat energy, and that familiar mix of music and laughter from every direction. Tamar remembers the place being packed but comfortable, everyone greeting each other casually. The type of interaction you'd never imagine would later be slowed down, magnified, and treated like evidence. Drinks were ordered, plates arrived, sizzling, and small conversations flowed around the table. At that moment, everything felt typical. Jokes, stories, light teasing, people coming and going, phones lighting up with notifications but ignored in favor of the moment. This dinner, which seemed like just another weekend meetup, would later be framed as the calm before the storm, the innocent setting that eventually spiraled into accusations, interviews, and viral threads that refused to die down. Tamar insists that nothing about the dinner was unusual. No tension, no sideways glances, no hint that the night would be retold 100 different ways. But hindsight has a way of twisting the past. And now every detail, who sat where, who whispered what, who stepped away from the table and for how long, is being scrutinized as if it were part of a mystery thriller. Still, in his version, it was just dinner, just friends. Just a normal evening that nobody could have predicted would later explode into the biggest social media storm of their lives. In the Tamer Mendes story leak, Section 5 marks the moment where the night subtly shifts from coincidence to concern, from casual encounters to eyebrow-raising patterns that begin to bother Funky on a deeper level. This is where the story stops feeling like a harmless hangout and starts carrying the weight of repetition, the kind that makes you wonder whether something is truly accidental. Funky recalls how Mendes appeared for the third time that night. And though nothing outwardly dramatic happened, the timing and frequency triggered a quiet alarm in his mind. First appearance, fine. Second, still believable. But the third, especially in a completely different part of the venue, made Funky sit up internally and ask himself if something more was happening beneath the surface. He starts describing the subtle cues, Mendes lingering just a little too long near the group, the soft but intentional eye contact between Mendes and the friend, and the way conversations abruptly shifted when certain people came near. These weren't big, loud signs. They were small, delicate signals that only someone with Funky's intuition and years of reading people could pick up on. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble has a way of revealing itself when patterns start repeating with uncanny precision. Funky's calm demeanor begins cracking ever so slightly as he narrates how each appearance felt more deliberate than the last. Almost like Mendes was orbiting around the group with a specific purpose. That unease sits heavy in his voice. Not anger yet, but a deep, simmering alertness. It's the kind of tension that builds quietly, the type that makes every future moment feel sharper, tighter, more suspicious. The implications start forming in Funky's mind. Was Mendes trying to send a signal? Was something going on behind everyone's backs? Were these repeated run-ins really just coincidence, or something orchestrated in plain sight? The atmosphere around the group thickens as these questions swirl, even if no one acknowledges them out loud. Funky describes how the energy changed, laughs got shorter, glances got quicker, and the night began to feel like a puzzle where pieces didn't fit right. In hindsight, this section becomes the chapter where the controversy truly begins taking shape, where tension quietly roots itself before growing into the explosive claims, confrontations, and social media storms that would later dominate the internet. In the Tamer Mendes story leak, Section 6 captures the moment when the night stops feeling casual and begins sliding into a zone of blurred boundaries, questionable choices, and an uncomfortable closeness that Funky can no longer ignore. After dinner, the group decides to hop venues, the kind of spontaneous decision that usually keeps the night fun and energetic. Sauce in Buckhead becomes the next destination, a spot known for its lively crowd, late-night playlists, and the type of scene where people float in and out of rooms like they're part of a music video. Plans get tossed around loosely. Let's hit V12, someone says, and everyone agrees, not knowing how that decision will later be replayed online in arguments, breakdown videos, and viral theories about motive and intention. What seemed like just another stop on a Saturday night route is now dissected as a critical turning point in the story. The real tension, however, brews during the car ride, the moment when physical closeness begins crossing lines and Funky's internal alarms start ringing loudly. The group squeezes into the vehicle, laughing, joking, shifting around. But the space is tight and people end up sitting on laps, leaning against each other, brushing shoulders in ways that might look innocent to some but feel strange to someone who already sensed earlier patterns forming. Funky describes it with a calm voice but a clear discomfort, explaining how Mendes ended up in a position far too intimate for someone who had just coincidentally appeared multiple times throughout the night. The close quarters, the shared warmth, the soft conversations, the hands resting in places they shouldn't, make Funky hyper-aware of the brewing dynamic between Mendes and the friend. He notices the whispered comments, the inside jokes exchanged quietly, the subtle shifts in body language that prove this was no random grouping. The car ride becomes a symbolic moment, too close, too familiar, too conveniently arranged. Funky's discomfort grows as he watches boundaries dissolve under the excuse of limited space. And he starts piecing together the implications of everything he's seen so far. From the repeated appearances to the suddenly intimate seating, the venue hops now feel orchestrated rather than spontaneous. Looking back, this car ride stands as the moment where the story turns sharply, where suspicion transforms into certainty for Funky, and where the night stops being just a night and instead becomes the prelude to the explosive drama, accusations, and internet chaos that would soon follow in the Tamer Mendes story leak. Section 7 becomes the psychological turning point, the moment where Funky's instincts, observations, and unease culminate in one decisive action that later becomes the heart of his defense. He chose to drive home. This choice, simple on the surface, carries a heavy symbolic weight once the drama erupts online. Funky explains that after the venue hops, the car ride intimacy, and the growing closeness between Mendes and the friend. He could feel the energy shifting in a direction he didn't want to be part of. The patterns had repeated too many times. The cues were too obvious. And the unspoken signals between the two were unmistakable. Funky didn't need someone to say it out loud. He could feel they wanted privacy, or at the very least, space away from extra eyes. Instead of staying and being the awkward third presence, he made what he believed was the respectful, non-confrontational choice. He quietly removed himself from the situation. "I drove home," he says, a line that becomes more than just a statement. It becomes the backbone of his entire narrative, a way to reposition blame and accountability in a story that the internet later twists with half-facts and assumptions. In his retelling, leaving wasn't avoidance. It was clarity. He believed they wanted to be alone, that the repeated appearances and car ride closeness were signs of a private connection unfolding between Mendes and the friend. And so, instead of interfering or inserting himself where he wasn't welcome, he stepped back. Online critics used this decision against him, accusing him of abandoning the group, overreacting, or trying to rewrite the night after the fact. Supporters, however, see it differently. Funky recognized something inappropriate and removed himself before getting dragged into the mess. The "I drove home" line becomes a counterpunch to accusations, a way for Funky to argue that he wasn't complicit, wasn't covering anything, and wasn't part of what happened next. It reframes the entire narrative, shifting responsibility away from him and onto the choices others continued making after he left. In hindsight, that quiet drive home becomes one of the most significant moves in the story, a moment of self-preservation, a boundary drawn, and the earliest sign that the night was headed toward a scandal no one could predict. No one could predict. In the Tamer Mendes story leak, Section 8 exposes one of the most volatile layers of the entire scandal, the widening gap between what Tamar remembers privately and what he later says publicly, a divide that fuels confusion, distrust, and online firestorms. This is where the narrative fractures. In early interviews, Tamar paints a dramatic picture. He talks about waking up in a pool of blood, about refusing an ambulance, about being so overwhelmed that he didn't even understand what was happening around him. These details hit the internet like gasoline, instantly sparking sympathy, chaos, and speculation. But as more interviews follow, the story subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, starts shifting. In one version, he says he was conscious the whole time. In another, he claims he blacked out. In one retelling, he insists the injury was severe enough to require medical help. In another, he dismisses the ambulance as unnecessary. The contradictions pile up, and the more he speaks, the more people start stitching clips together, comparing timelines, analyzing tone and body language, exposing every inconsistency like detectives with too much time. It becomes clear that Tamar's public narrative is no longer perfectly aligned with the private timeline Funky and others experienced that night. Funky recalls no dramatic chaos, no blood on the floor, no frantic ambulance refusals, certainly not the cinematic version. Tamar later sells in interviews, And this clash between private memory and public storytelling becomes a central tension. Is Tamar exaggerating to protect himself? Rewriting events to gain sympathy? Or simply confused by stress and the pressure of the spotlight? Online commentators dig deeper, pointing out how certain details appear only after social media speculation grows. Almost like Tamar is retrofitting his story to respond to the internet's expectations. The more he tries to clarify, the more tangled the narrative becomes, leaving room for doubt, suspicion, and endless debate. Some defend him fiercely, arguing that trauma distorts memory. Others accuse him of manipulation, claiming he's bending the truth to distance himself from Mendes and the scandal that's now consuming them both. As Section 8 unfolds, the contradiction between public narrative and private memory becomes a battleground. Interviews, reaction videos, and commentary threads war over which version is real. What was once a night of questionable decisions is now a maze of shifting explanations, each new interview rewriting the last, turning Tamar from a victim in one moment to an unreliable narrator in the next. In the Tamer Mendes story leak, Section 9 digs into the raw emotional core of the controversy, the part most people watching from the outside never fully grasp: the toll the unfolding scandal takes on Funky himself, the backlash he faces, and the growing awareness that whoever controls the narrative controls the truth. As Tamer's interviews multiply and his versions of events shift, Funky becomes the unintended target of suspicion, mockery, and blame. People accuse him of exaggerating, of being jealous, of stirring drama for attention, and even of fabricating moments that the public insists don't add up, all while ignoring the contradictions in Tamar's statements. Funky describes how deeply this cut him, not just the lies, but the way the internet was willing to rewrite his entire character based on selective storytelling. Posts he made trying to clarify the timeline were taken out of context, twisted, or dismissed, leading him to delete them altogether when the harassment became overwhelming. That deletion later became weaponized against him, with people saying if he deleted it, he must be lying, never once considering that sometimes silence is the last form of self-protection a person has. He talks about the exhaustion of watching others shape a story he lived through, only to see himself removed from the narrative or painted as the villain to make someone else look cleaner, softer, more innocent. Tamer's selective storytelling, choosing dramatic details here, omitting uncomfortable truths there, becomes a major point of pain for Funky. Every time Tamar revises a detail on camera, the internet revises their judgment of Funky as well, leaving him fighting shadows and half-truths he never agreed to. The emotional toll piles up: sleepless nights, constant dimes, people dragging his name into threads, strangers diagnosing his motives as if they were experts in his life. And through all of this, Funky realizes something unsettling. The story isn't about what actually happened anymore. It's about whose voice is louder, whose interview goes viral, whose clip gets clipped into something shareable and sensational. Narrative control becomes the true battleground. Funky, who tried to stay quiet and respectful at first, finds his silence interpreted as guilt, while Tamer's louder, more polished media presence becomes the accepted version of truth. This section exposes how fragile factual reality becomes once public opinion gets involved. It shows Funky confronting the painful realization that once a story leaves the private world and enters the public arena, truth isn't what happened, it's what people choose to believe. In the Tamer Mendes story leak, Section 10 explores the most haunting part of the night: the unsaid, the unrecorded, the closed door behind which the most crucial truths remain locked. Funky repeatedly emphasizes that while he witnessed the movements, the proximity, the intimate exchanges, and the subtle cues leading up to that night, he never went upstairs with Tamar. The people who did Mendes and his friend are the only ones who hold the fragments of the events that truly matter, and their silence leaves a gaping void in the narrative. That vacuum of unspoken moments becomes a psychological weight, not only for Funky, who is trapped between public scrutiny and private truth, but also for the audience, who must piece together a story riddled with gaps, contradictions, and insinuations. The public fills in these gaps with speculation, social media theories, and countless threads. But every attempt remains a partial reconstruction, the true sequence of actions, motivations, and intentions locked behind that closed door. Funky's recounting creates a tension between what is remembered and what is deliberately withheld, showing how silence itself can be a storyteller, shaping perception and controlling narrative by absence. The unresolved ending becomes the defining characteristic of the night. Tamer's selective memory, the deleted posts, the shifting statements, and the lack of accountability leave everyone guessing who was present, what occurred in those critical minutes, and how it altered relationships forever. Funky's reflections suggest that the unresolved nature of the events isn't accidental. It is a carefully maintained ambiguity that manipulates attention and fuels speculation. He positions himself not as an accuser, but as a witness trapped outside the room, observing the aftermath while aware that the final pieces exist only with the two people who actually went upstairs. The silence becomes almost tangible, a pressure that lingers over interviews, social media commentary, and public perception, transforming ordinary spaces, a car, a restaurant, a house, into stages where the unseen actions dominate the narrative. As the story winds down, Funky conveys the eerie weight of living in a world where half-truths, omissions, and carefully curated versions of events dictate reputations, loyalties, and moral judgment. The night ends not with clarity, but with questions that pulse long after the cameras are off. A closed room whose contents may never be fully revealed, and a truth that exists only in fragments, whispered memories, and the unresolved tension between what was seen, what was told, and what remains forever unsaid.